part of monocytic macrophage system. Monocyte macrophage system and working as the phagocytes. When these cells are inside the bloodstream, these are the monocytes, but in antigen response, when tissue is infected or damaged, these cells leave the bloodstream and migrate inside the tissues, where these cells are known as macrophage. When we see the connective tissue, like the loose connective tissue and dense connective tissue, frequently we will see the clusters of macrophages if the tissue is infected, and in non-infected tissues also we can see the monocytes, which are the circulating cells, and the macrophages, which are the tissue monocytes. So this is the first type of agranular or non-granular leukocyte. The second type is the lymphocytes. The lymphocytes are slightly larger than the RBCs, and the nuclei, or in single cell I will call the nucleus, occupies almost all the cell. So this cell is having large nucleus. There are two types of lymphocytes: the B lymphocyte and the T lymphocytes. The B lymphocytes differentiate and mature and grow in the bone marrow in response to the antigen. If body is exposed to some antigen, lymphocytes will differentiate in B lymphocytes, and these will mature and grow as B lymphocytes. These cells, B lymphocytes, in response to antigen will give origin to the plasma cells. And the plasma cells will form the immunoglobulins, the IgD and IgM. Ig immunoglobulin D and Ig immunoglobulin M are formed by the plasma cells, which are formed by the B lymphocyte in response to some antigen. These all three components, the B lymphocytes, the plasma cells, and the immunoglobulin IgD and IgM, are forming the humoral immunity. So this component of the blood is responsible for the humoral immune response, or I can say the humoral immunity. And this humoral immunity or immune response is also forming the basis for the immunization. Children, newborns, are immunized against some viral and bacterial diseases. When these B lymphocytes are exposed, to some antigen, these cells will form the plasma cells, which will secrete the IgD and IgM immunoglobulins. This type of reaction is known as primary immune response. But when some antigen is exposed to the B lymphocytes, these cells are also having memory B cells. The cell membrane of these memory B cells are having the antibodies against the previously exposed antigen, or I can say these memory cells are having the ready-made antibodies against a specific antigen. So when a child is vaccinated or immunized against some disease, this antigen will stimulate the B lymphocyte to form the plasma cells, and plasma cells will form the antibodies known as immunoglobulin D and immunoglobulin M, and these memory cells are having the antibodies when the body is re-exposed by the same disease which was given in form of vaccine. These B cells will immediately fire because these are having ready-made antibodies, and these antibodies will kill or engulf the foreign bacteria or the virus. So this type of response is known as the secondary immune response. So what is the basis of the vaccination or immunization? When body is immunized, it is having inactive form of viruses or antigen of virus or bacteria. These exposed antigens will stimulate the B lymphocytes, which will form the plasma cells, which will secrete the antibodies IgD and IgM, and when the body is exposed to the bacteria or virus of the same antigen, the memory B cells will fire and kill the foreign body or antigen immediately by secondary immune response. The second component of the lymphocyte is the T lymphocyte. The T lymphocytes these lymphocytes are matured and differentiate in the thymus. After differentiation and maturation in thymus, T lymphocytes migrate in the spleen, in the lymph nodes, and in the lymphoid tissues of the GIT. So these migrate in the spleen, lymph nodes, and lymphoid tissue of the GIT. So the cellular component of the blood is having two types of cells, the granular and agranular leukocytes, the erythrocytes or the red blood cells, and third type of cell is the thrombocytes or the platelets. These days when the infection of dengue is very common in tropical countries, thrombocytes. These are fragments of large megakaryocytes in the bone marrow. So these are fragments of megakaryocytes and playing important role in the thrombus formation or clot formation. Important role in clotting. These cells migrate at the clotting site and form a grid with the neutrophils, and these cells are also secreting the serotonin. The migrating thrombocytes towards the injured area also secrete the serotonin, which is vasoconstrictor, and it constrict the arterial wall and check the bleeding. So vasoconstrictor and decrease bleeding. So it is decrease and stopping bleeding by not only clotting but also secreting the serotonin, which is vasoconstrictive, and it stops the bleeding. It is thrombocyte is fragment of the large megakaryocytes in the bone marrow. The second component of the blood is the non-cellular or the acellular component. Acellular component of the blood is known as plasma. Which is having 90% water and 10% of plasma is formed by the inorganic ions. The proteins, also known as plasma proteins, and the lipids. So the acellular or non-cellular component of blood is formed by the plasma, which is having 90% of water. 10% of plasma is formed by the inorganic ions, the plasma proteins, and the lipids. The plasma proteins are three main proteins known as albumin. Albumin is formed by the liver and it provides viscosity to the blood, and maintaining and regulating the blood pressure. BP is maintained and regulated by the albumin, and it provides viscosity to the blood. The second plasma protein is the globulin. The second type of plasma protein is globulin, which is of alpha globulin, beta globulin. Alpha and beta both are formed by the liver, and alpha and beta globulins are playing key role in transportation of the fat soluble or the lipid soluble vitamins. The gamma globulin is formed by the lymphoid tissues. Gamma globulins are also known as immunoglobulins, and it is formed by the lymphoid tissues, and it is playing important role in the body immunity. The third type of plasma protein, first is albumin, globulin, and third is fibrinogen. It is also formed by the liver, and it is playing important role in the clotting formation, and this fibrinogen playing role in clotting of the blood with the platelets. And this component, when we remove this fibrinogen from the plasma by centrifugation, it is known as serum. So plasma minus fibrinogen is known as the serum. So fibrinogen is thrombogenic, and when we remove this fibrinogen from the plasma, it is known as serum. So in this lecture we have seen the components of the cardiovascular system, the heart, blood vessels, and the blood specialized connective tissue, and it is having cellular and acellular components. Cellular is having erythrocytes, leukocytes, and the thrombocytes, or the fragment of the megakaryocytes in the bone marrow. We have seen the acellular or non-cellular compartment or component of the blood, which is having plasma, which is formed by the water 90% and 10% by inorganic ions, proteins known as plasma proteins, which are of three types: albumin, globulin, and fibrinogen. When we remove fibrinogen from the plasma, it is known as the serum. In my next lecture of cardiovascular system, I will talk about the gross anatomy of the heart in crisp and concise manner, and then I will talk about the blood vessels, the arteries and vessels, and the capillaries.